amazing because when we hosted the first one, I didn't know if one person would show up, and all of you have continued to show up. To me, it's kind of amazing at how that we've evolved and the things that we've gone through, and we're still getting together, still communicating, and if anything, more and more communication is coming through. And I'm going to introduce someone to you that is responsible for making sure that all of our communication happens, and that's Eileen McDougall. This is my administrative coordinator. She's my right-hand person. All of the things that I do during the course of my work week would not be possible without Eileen's assistance. So she's very, very good at what she does, and I'm very appreciative to have her on our team. Okay, I like to do something when I'm doing presentations to get the brain working, to get people thinking. So, what year do you think this is?
1973.
If you guessed 1975, you would be right. There were a lot of clues, including the Nova that's sitting there and all of that. My grandmother had a 1970 Nova or 71, somewhere in that range, that was very similar to that. You can imagine this 60 to 70-year-old lady driving around with a big V8 engine in the car, and so the literal hot rod grandma. Have any ideas? And the reason I ask this is the year that we started. This was the first year that we got together. And the reason I thought this was kind of funny is because Billy Ray Cyrus was in collaboration with this gentleman. Where it all started, at Circle B Bar Reserve, April 10th, 2019. This is the poster that we had. And once again, when we started this, I did not know if one person would show up. I'd spent hours upon hours researching all of you and sending out emails and trying to see if there was any interest in what we were doing. There was one singular goal out of all of this. This symposium is intended as an exchange of information and ideas on how to make our local government processes better. That was my goal from day one, and that's still my goal to this day, and I hope that is your goal, and that's a hope, something that I hope that we can continue to build upon and to work upon, and that's what this presentation is about letting you know how far that we've come in these 3 years. But we've got a long ways to go. This room should be twice this size, filled with people. So we need your help to make that happen. That first meeting, I'm going to point somebody out because he was there and many of you were there. Right there's Danny. Right there on the right. Danny's been a part of this from the beginning, and he continues, even though he's gone to Fort Pierce Utilities Authority. He's been a part of it, and he's going to continue to be a part of it because he knows the importance of what we're doing, and I appreciate the help of Danny. Andrew's been on board. He's been priceless in his assistance. Another gentleman who could not make it today has been involved is Kerry Knight out of Key West. He's been assisting. This is the amazing part of where we're at. There are 67 counties in Florida. We have 66 involved. We are receiving questions There are 52 out of 411 cities, towns, and villages. That's the one area where that we've not had a lot of success on getting different municipalities involved. This number is growing. There have been 555 responses to 47 different questions. And that was upon the point of when I did this presentation. Since then, it's kind of been a boom over the last few weeks, so that number has grown. But the important part of that is this. 144 different people responding to the 47 questions. That tells you there is interest, and people find what we're doing is important to how they do business. And the more that we can reach out and the more that we can expand our resources, the more that we will be able to improve our operations. The challenges that we faced over the last 2 years, the pandemic, we saw a direct impact in our second symposium by the number of people that were able to come. The folks from Charlotte County, they were there, appreciative of that. They've been on board with us from the beginning. How many remember this scene? You know, shut everything down and there was no traffic, and you could start to see it on the maps of the pollution and stuff because there was no vehicles out on the road. And all of our mask mandate. Used to, if you wore a mask, you could get arrested. Now, you know, there for a while, if you didn't wear a mask, you could get arrested. And we talked about the supply chain issues. And I mentioned the generator, 52 weeks on something that normally took 16 weeks. We had garage doors. Who would have thought that garage doors for a fire station could delay it opening 4 months? That's what happened to us. We couldn't get the CO. It doesn't matter, we're in Florida and they leave the garage doors open 24 hours a day. We couldn't get garage doors on it to get a CO. Who would have thought? Now, if it had been up north, I would have got it where I'm from, where it gets cold all the time, and it rains and does all that. Rising fuel cost. You know, certain parts of the country. Thankfully, when I say thankfully, $4.29 was what I paid this morning when I got gas. My daughter was, who was just down when she went back home to Indianapolis, she was thrilled that gas was below $5 a gallon in the Indianapolis area. The labor shortage. The labor shortage was here before the pandemic, folks. It's going to be here long after you heard what this gentleman was talking about, the numbers of that. We've got to be creative. We've got to work together. We've got to do things. And throughout the day, we'll talk more about this. But these are some of the challenges that we've all faced. The new norm. How many have Zoom meetings now, or Microsoft Teams, or all that? How many of you are doing that now as a regular? All of us are doing that now. I tried to get our folks before the pandemic to do GoPros or something to do site visits or pre-construction meetings where that we're having mandatory pre-con meetings or pre-bid meetings to use GoPros and stuff to get more contractors involved. Well, guess what? We've got to do it now. It's part of our normal operations to do Zoom or Microsoft Teams. It's part of what we do now. Facilities management organizations, APWA, APA, which is Association of Physical Plant Administrators there over higher education. Who knew that there was a National Association of Church Facility Managers? I had no clue. IFMA, which is an excellent organization, and the Pro FM folks, who I think who are new, that I think do a tremendous job on their educational materials that they offer. Why do I have the American Institute of Architects up there, other than the fact that I'm a member? The power of 13 architects met in the office of New York architect Richard Upjohn in 1857. Their goal, form an organization to promote architects and architecture. That was the beginning of the AIA. 2 months later, the AIA was incorporated. Now they have almost 90,000 members worldwide. 3 years ago, we had 34 people show up to our first symposium. That's how the AIA started, was with 13 guys getting together to decide that they would do things better if they joined together. Architects are very competitive with one another. They're not like us. They're not they're not, they only stay in business if they're making money. So for them to do that, join together, band together, to make their profession better, that says a lot about where we're
Can,
That's the type of information. that-
can I ask everybody to use the mic, because we are recording this? So if we want to hear this in the future, just use the mic, please. Thank you.
This book is a list of all the questions that have been asked and the responses that came back. And Eileen she prints it out, puts it in this book. She also keeps it electronically. So if you are wanting the total list of questions and responses, we can get those to you. But that is a good idea. Andrew, when he and I talked at one point in time, and I don't remember if this was when we were at St. Lucie County or not, but Andrew mentioned, do we look at a website or something like that in the future, where that people can go and research and look at all these questions right now without having to have Eileen be the records keeper, to where that it's hosted. And for those of you who don't realize, in discussions with my deputy county manager, a person who I report directly to, he said this is also how the Florida Association of Counties started, and it's evolved into that, and then the National Association of Counties. So don't sell this process short. It has a very high ceiling, but it's up to everyone to decide what that ceiling is going to be. Any other questions, comments?
Is there networks like this throughout other states?
To be honest, I've not ever looked at that. I was just happy that we got, once again, I was tickled to death that we had one person show up, because I didn't know how many people were going to show up. And, it's a very valid question. I do not know if there is a networking group. Once again, the difference between a lot of these organizations, IFMA, Pro FM, when you're going through their training programs, it focuses on one thing and one thing only: the ability to make a profit. Is a profit your number one guiding principle when you're trying to do business? When that commissioner comes up and says that they want to do something, does that have anything to do with profits? No. The world that we live in is different, and the rules change daily. And it changes from the moment one commissioner leaves and another one takes their seat. So I wish that I would say, or could say, that these other groups are beneficial, but when it comes to the public side, they don't really address at all what we do. It's all for profit. Yes, sir.
My name's Tony Pribble. I work for Charlotte County. I'm the security manager for Charlotte County. As I see on the agenda that you guys have some security in here, has that been brought into the forefront in governmental entities where you're bringing more security technology and things like that, not just the IT side of it, but the actual physical security and stuff like that? Because that would be a great benefit to, I think, all the counties. I'm not sure if you guys have security under your facilities departments, but I know we do. And I know I'm part of Association of Threat Assessment Professionals and ASIS, which is a international organization, and they bring in speakers and law enforcement and stuff like that to talk about the physical security aspects of your facilities, and especially in design.
Well, at our last symposium, I think that the IT side and the security side kind of got omitted, not intentionally. I think it was intended to be there, that thing, it was intended to be a follow-up, but we just got in discussions, and there were a lot of other things that were a higher priority, but yes, it is valid.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing we found in my county at least, especially with our commissioners, is they're big on the security for the customers as well as the staff and the safety. So that may be just a suggestion, something to bring to the forefront more to up your membership, bring in the security professionals and things like that. I've been doing security and law enforcement for over 30 years now, and that's really one of the big things that we're looking at and working on.
Keith, you're going to hear this afternoon our team from our operations side. This is Andrew with Pasco County. You're going to hear security, anything physical security, including access control, CCTV, locks, Alice, all of that type of, all of those type of scenarios will be brought up this afternoon, but also HVAC. You'll hear contract management. You'll hear a bunch of different things. All of that is part of facilities management. Just a quick show of hands, though, to answer your question, because you asked how many have security within their facility teams. Who has security, physical security in there? Okay, so that's a good chunk of us.
I'll add one thing, I'm all over Hillsborough County, so it's
Hey, John, there's a seat right here that has your name, so come on up to the table.
I'm sorry, I'm plugged in. But it's one of the fastest, obviously, growing in terms of what we're doing in scope. But I just wanted to note one thing. I thought about it a little bit, and I wondered if it should be a little subgroup only, because we are very, very, we try to keep with the security, not for public disclosure, with all of our information. It doesn't matter what I say to this group, you're welcome to anything, but just like you're recording this, right? It could become a public record. So we keep as much as we can are allowed to out of it. And that includes we have agreements with deputies, we have cameras, we have an active threat training and protocol. We have I'll say our First Amendment auditors also fall under our security team just because of the nature of what they're trying to do. And other things. But any of that information anybody's welcome to, just how we would send it would be not for public disclosure.
Our IT folks like to brag about what they are doing, and which was amazing to me when I came to Polk County, because I came from the higher education world. And if you've not ever been on a college campus, there was a saying that one of my colleagues had, and that was, they said they were college students. Nobody said they were smart. So when you're going through, every single one of them, or the great majority of them at least, are trying to hack into your IT system. If nothing else, just so they can get a higher grade in their class to show that they can do it. But that was the one thing like what you're talking about, they did not want at EKU, even though it's subjected to the same open records, sunshine laws as Florida. It's just people aren't as crazy about asking like they are here in Florida. But they didn't want people to know what they were doing on the security side. So now's the time to discuss those. And maybe subcommittees or forming some committees to discuss those types of issues, get people to sign up on them, and then at our next symposium next year, they bring back the results on some of those. That's the type of things that, maybe that's the next step in the evolution of our networking group, is to have different subcommittees form, and then, on a particular, whether it's IT, security, and to gather information and to meet, whether it's by Zoom or otherwise, to overcome the time and distance aspect. But
I just had a conversation with Tom Johnson over here, who's our assistant O&M manager, and we have transitioned to Microsoft 365. Who else in the room is on 365? Okay. Is anybody not using Microsoft products? Okay, that's good. We have started, and Tom's going to talk a little bit about this afternoon. You'll see kind of how we're using it in contractor examples. But we could start up a Teams site, Microsoft Teams site, that would also incorporate some other features like a kind of a bulletin board wiki type page. And that could be, and we would be glad to host it because we have open access. A lot of, some organizations have closed access. We've allowed ours to be open access, but it's also hosted on government servers. So there's also some security with that. And we'd be willing to start up a page that to be the Florida Facilities Information Network kind of Teams page. And then that could be a resource and a bulletin board and a wiki and where all these documents and questions could live in perpetuity, and then we can grant access to everybody to be able to get into that site.
Excellent. Now, I'm going to, I'm not even sure what time it is right now, where we're going. We've got plenty of time, it looks like. What I'm going to ask everyone to do so that we're not having to introduce ourselves every time that we pick up the microphone is to go around and introduce yourself and then tell what county you're with and what your title is.
Leo Da Silva, I'm from Brevard County, the Facilities Program Manager.
Dana McDonald, Hillsborough County Business Operations Manager.
Osdale Larrea. I'm the Director of Public Works and Capital Projects for the town of Davie in Broward County. And just to add to a comment that you made before, you know, Public Works and facilities don't have to be enemies. We can all work together.
We're not enemies, but we're not enemies, but the software that Public Works uses is different than the needs, and too many times the Public Works side, because it's under that, is trying to push a square peg into a round hole, and it just, the software doesn't work. You need to be able to use software, a CMMS, that works for facilities management, because we're building up, and Public Works is.
I agree with you. We need to talk more because we're in the process of getting a new software.
Absolutely. Andrew Baxter, Pasco County Facilities Management Director.
Lance Marine, Highlands County Parks and Facilities Director.
Frank Cristiano, Facilities Manager, City of North Lauderdale.
Tom Wynke, Building Manager, City of St. Pete.
Alfred Wendler, Director of Real Estate and Property Management for the City of St. Pete.
Darla So, Business Services Manager, Charlotte County.
Travis Purdue, Facilities Director, Charlotte County.
Randy Cole, Charlotte County Facilities Operations and Maintenance Manager.
Roger Warner, Charlotte County. I'm in charge of oversee the construction management. So.
Tony Preble, Security Manager, Charlotte County.
Mark Hithcart, Building Maintenance Manager for Polk County.
Bill Bergstresser. I'm a Facility Superintendent for Martin County.
Keith Bruton, City of Tampa, Facility Manager.
Jameson Bachtel, City of Tampa, Supervisor.
Jared Goodspeed, Facilities Management Director of Marion County.
Mike Bates, Marion County Assistant Director.
I'm James Phillips, and I'm the Maintenance Supervisor at Sumter County Detention Center.
Danny Rutherford, I'm previous Facilities Director for San Lucie County, currently Director of Utility Support Services, which has a facilities for Fort Pierce Utility Authority.
And
And I'm Eileen McDougall, the Administrative Coordinator for Polk County.
And Jared Goodspeed, I contact or speak with him often, so. Yes, he's,
Hi, I'm Laura Singer with Hillsborough County, Division Director of Operations and Maintenance.
Good morning, Doug Anderson, Pasco County Assistant Director of Facilities Management.
do you want to introduce your folks?
Heather Wolf, Pasco County Real Property and Planning Manager.
Tom Johnson, Assistant Facilities Operations and Maintenance Manager.
And I'm John Muller, Director for Facilities Management and Real Estate for Hillsborough County.
Nick Laffis, Real Estate Division, Real Property and Planning, one position.
I'll finish it off, and I'm Brittany Winters. I'm with Facilities Management, Pasco County. I'm the admin assistant to Andrew.
So you keep Andrew straight.
Yes, absolutely. And this could not have happened without the assistance of Brittany and many others, Eileen as well. They're just as, that support that we have with our teams is just incredible that we have. So thank you to all of them.
And I want to mention Jared because he and I have talked on numerous occasions, and I don't think that don't remember ever meeting you in person, but Jared has been an excellent resource as well. So welcome and thank you for all your support with all of what we've been doing over the last few years. What's next, guys? What do you want? Where do we go? What do we do? And that's really the theme that I've tried to get. And by the way, now that we've all introduced ourselves, we don't have to introduce ourselves again. So no more introductions. We're all friends. We're all colleagues. So when you pick up the mic, just talk, and we're all here together.
So my background was coming from the federal side for the last 26 years and transitioning to a local government. I tell you what, the most difficult for me is the fact that there's not very good standardizations. Every time you talk to someone, hey, what's the process? Well, we did this last time like this, so I think it's going to work. And then we push through, it gets denied, can't do that. In the federal side, there's regulations for everything. Standardization for everything makes my life easier, even though it's too much restriction, but at least I know the rules. Where do we go forward here? How do we go forward and create some sort of standardization for the state where everybody can play by the same rules? What do you guys think about it?
Well, I think that's part of why all this started and why that I started looking. Those of you who have been to the previous two have heard me say this, and Mark hears me fuss about this constantly. We have 6,500 plus cost centers that we charge stuff to. We're in the process of, Mark and the rest of our team has just started working with Maven to implement Maximo, which is an IBM product. And the reason that we settled on them is because of how complicated we are. What's the difference between configure and what's the other word? Customize. What's the difference between configure and customize? Does anybody know? Money. If you customize something, you better get out go to the bank and get a boatload. So you want to configure your software. You don't want to customize it. So when you're going through this process, those are two words you need to know the meaning of. You were talking about, know the two words. If you customize, expect to, your price is going to increase. So But that's why that we started this, was looking for ways to find out how other people do things. Andrew does it with one cost center. We have 6,500 plus. You know, I'm trying to convince, and I've got money allocated to do a study of what we do, a survey of what we do. But it still takes a willingness from the clerk of courts and procurement to be willing to make some of those changes. But the first step in that process is for us to do an evaluation of how we do things and what we do. Just me standing in front of them and ranting and raving is not enough. No different than the $1.48 an hour jail incentive. The more that I can learn from you, all around this table, helps me to build a business case to where that when I see what each of you are doing and how well that you do it and that you're doing it differently, I can build a business case to make changes. But without you, I have no shot. So what you're talking about, a standardization, the more that we can share how that we are doing things, the more that each of us can build a business case for what we're doing. Together, we are strong. Individually, we've got no hope. There's an old joke about a guy who hadn't been to church forever, and he was out sitting next to a fire, and he had this big bonfire going, and his preacher came up, and he was wanting him to come back into the congregation. And all the preacher did was walk up, take one piece of wood out of that fire, and that fire blazing. Took one piece of wood out, and he walked over, and he set it down on the ground. As this group of wood blazed, that one slowly went out. And the guy's response was, "I'll see you on Sunday." Because individually, that piece of wood couldn't burn. But as a group, it was able to light up and heat and to do things. And that's the same thing that we're doing. Together, we can build business cases and we can change how we do things. Yes, sir.
I know one of the conversations Tom and I have on a regular basis is I hired Tom away from the city of Clearwater about 1.5 years ago. And what they do at the city versus what we do at the city of St. Pete are totally different. So I agree with you on the standardization, because it's interesting, because where I work, everybody thinks we do it the best way, and that they kind of have an ego set that says that the rest of the county looks for them for direction. And then when Tom comes in, he says, "We never even heard of you guys, basically. You know, we've heard of you, but we don't pay any attention to you." So where I work, it works in a vacuum where they think literally all the best practices are being applied. And I told Tom when I hired him that the majority of his job was going to be fighting against the internal processes that we have to deal with. And he thought I was kidding. So now he's laughing because he knows what I mean. But the problem I have is that I can't point to anything to say, you know, we're doing it wrong. And we deal with our procurement, who, you know, relies on state statutory requirements. But even then, they seem to, it's a case-by-case basis. And, you know, so I think it'd be interesting to be able to develop some, you know, operational standards for governmental agencies, for facilities, because at the same time, our engineering and capital improvement department they have what they call CAMP, and I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but they're looking at, we're not a centralized facilities management, so Tom and I oversee just 3 buildings, and then Parks and Recreation oversees their buildings, and then we have enterprise facilities downtown oversees their facilities, and the problem we have is that there's no continuity in systems that we use, in contractors that you use, in contracts, because, for example, we're going through some of the contracts are up for renewal, and they don't even apply to our buildings. But we just did one where Tom got some money included in the contract because it made sense, but we're not even thought of, even though we oversee City Hall, which should be the most visible building. So I think that if we could work, you know, how the AIA has your standardized forms, you pull out the one form and you sign it and everybody's good with it. If we, you know, head that direction, I realize it'd probably take a while, but something along those lines would be very helpful, I think, because it seems like all of us are kind of reinventing the wheel, but we all do the same thing and we all have the state laws we're trying to comply with.
Well, that's kind of my point and why that I showed the AI, or used the AIA as an example. Number one, I'm a member of that organization, so I know how big and cumbersome that it's gotten. But also seeing where and knowing how that it got started. Has anyone ever heard of the name Richard Morris Hunt? He was one of the original 13 architects there. He designed the base of the Statue of Liberty. Have you ever heard of the Biltmore Estate? He designed the Biltmore Estate. That's the type of people that saw the need. Famous architects at that time getting together just like this. We need to do what you're talking about. I understand you're not, there was someone else recently that was talking to me about the same thing that you're talking about and dealing with. When you have zones, you have to work very hard to have an established line of communications, to have standardizations, because people do this. They pull in. This is my world and you can't touch it. This is how I'm going to do it. I don't care what you have to say. So you have to do a lot of stuff to where that you're meeting as a group, you're doing group training, and to overcome that. And then you have to have a Mark Cathcart that is a strong enough personality that knows what standardization and how that means and what it means and how that it can benefit you, and understands the importance of the group training. He is a big part of why that we're able to do the things that we do at Polk County. He's a very strong individual. He's been there a long time. He does an excellent job. So when we're going through this process of what you're talking about in the isolation, even though we are over 2,000 square miles and we have 7 maintenance districts, we're able to overcome a lot of the things. Now, don't even begin to talk about when you throw in personalities. When you throw in individual personalities, that God bless you. So, but yes, you're right on what you're talking about. We need to have some of those, and maybe over the next day and a half, part of the things that we can work toward is getting, like I said, subcommittees together, whether it's a group of 4 or 5 that can meet on different things, whether it's a security and IT aspect and the budgeting, because that's where I want to get to. I want to get to where he's at. I want to get to a point where instead of having 6,500 plus cost centers, I have one. And then we handle things on the backside like Andrew does.
So I think we should also really think about including procurement departments in our organization, if not maybe hold events for them, because like, for example, we're now on our 2nd procurement director in a year and a half. And so he was just asking Tom some questions about, why don't we have centralized facilities? Why don't we do some of this? Why can't we, leverage the power of the entire organization versus one-off things? And we're like, yeah, that makes sense. But there's a reason why within our city that we did it. The challenge is that absent something to point at saying what's best practices, it's hard to sit there and convince people who, quite frankly, all the people I deal with, we're an afterthought that, the building, it never on the forefront, even though they're literally in the building every day, they don't want to spend the money on it. But so I think that's really would be helpful to get the procurement guys in to understand what we're dealing with. Because I had an instance where we've also turned over that manager, but I had a manager try to tell me that her procurement policies are in place to make my life easier, and I couldn't help it. I literally laughed in her face, and I said, then you've never dealt with your department, have you? Because it's just crazy.
It's not just, this isn't procurement. How long do you think from the time we post a job that it takes for us to get somebody in as an employee?
You can find somebody? That's what we've been struggling with.
72 days.
Wow.
72 days is what it takes us to get somebody on board. Yes, level 2. Yeah, that's the easy part.
No? When they ask questions, some of the members will send the questions to their different departments. If it replies to that department more, like maybe to their procurement department, science, specific example, but clearly not the facilities department. And then those people ask to join the distribution because they want to see what other counties are doing. They'll send me a separate email. This is very helpful. Wow, interesting to see what other ones. I've also heard from different members who had their county managers or their county senior management say, hey, don't you have that group? We'd really like to know. And that's where some of the questions come. They want to know what the other divisions and what they are doing. We do end up with some people in different departments outside facilities that join the.
If you want to get procurement on board, if you want to get the clerk of courts on board, the only way to do that is to build a business case. As I said, me standing up in front of them and ranting and raving and doing all the maniac stuff, that's not going to change their mind. But when you can show how that it's going to save money, save time, and make their life easier, then they're willing to listen. You know, you made a comment a minute ago. You know, nobody, you know, all this information and all this, but nobody's, we do it differently, and the reason, well, nobody's going to jail. That's, you know, and that's the main thing. You don't hear about it in the paper and all that, and as long as nobody's going to jail, nobody wants to hear about it.
I've actually had that comment made to me. We're doing it this way. I had my former administrator say, I've done it this way in 4 different municipalities. I haven't gone to jail yet, so don't worry about it, which isn't really a great validation in my opinion, but.
Well, everybody, or a lot of people have heard me say this, our folks have heard me say this. Everybody thinks safety is the #1 goal. That is incorrect. #1 goal every single day should be not to become a witness for the defense or the prosecution. If you do that, then safety has been taken care of. But that should be your #1 goal every day, is not to become a witness for the defense or the prosecution. So when you're going through this process, that's what you have to convince them, that by doing these changes, they're not going to become a witness for the defense or the prosecution. All right, Andrew, I guess it's time to turn it over to you and